Hello everybody, Jose Rodriguez back again. If you guys caught my 2 live streams this past weekend, basically I talked about this system that RUDY came up with, a refilling system for OEM cartridges that have not been modified. And of course, we still have the original method we've been doing for practically a decade now, which is also as reliable. And that means you have to remove the factory ball, drill out the seat, flush your cartridge if you choose to do so, especially the yellow one needs to be flushed, and then proceed to, from now on, just simply reset your chip with one of these resetters and fill the empty liquid chamber with ink, allow it to absorb into the sponge. Keep an eye on it, make sure that you don't reach the very top of that liquid chamber, because once you modify your cartridges, you have actually changed the internal hydraulics that actually control ink flow. It's not like it's going to not work. Of course it will work, it's just that things have been changed at this point. Let me take a little drink here. I know I'm probably going to repeat myself, as I have done many times in the past. In the old days, I'm talking almost 2 decades ago, we were using this method that has now been sort of revived, and that is to refill via pressure and vacuum from the exit port your cartridges. You need a special device to do that, and we came up with all sorts of different combinations of gadgets and thingamajigs, and none of them really worked that well. Well, RUDY has spent months working on this, and we're going to go ahead and give it a run. I have not done this yet, so this is going to be a test run. I'm going to do it close up, and hopefully it will work, and I will not make a fool of myself in front of you all. But basically what we have is the unit. This is the actual device. It's going to hold a cartridge attached to this specially designed port. This is the cart holder that RUDY also designed. Basically, if you choose to remain with the modified cartridges that Rick Johnson sells, you will have to get one of these, my friends. This will alleviate your refilling problems to no end, okay? Because it allows you to have a third hand helping you. You no longer have to worry about holding on to cartridges while you're trying to perform other operations. Let me put this here in the box. I printed out the instructions. I already read them. I hope I have memorized them. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to try to duplicate this effect. Even from this far, you will see that the top of the sponge does not have ink on it. That's what happens in a factory-filled cartridge. And this is an empty one. It has the same identical situation going on at the very top. When you go ahead and you modify these cartridges and you refill them, that sponge will then fill to the very top. Here's the danger that you may run in, and it's very easily avoidable. The cartridges have a serpentine vent. It's an air vent that allows air to enter as ink is being drawn out to be used for creating prints. So that air passes through that serpentine vent, very controlled way, and it enters inside and replaces what used to be liquid ink. Well, on an OEM cartridge, the liquid chamber, this is brand spanking new, I have not even cracked it open yet. That chamber is filled to the very tippy top. No problem. The sponge is not saturated to the top, so the vent will be kept free of ink. Not so on a modified cartridge. Not so. When you overfill it, ink will then travel all the way up the sponge and could possibly enter the vent. That will cause an ink lock. Basically, the cartridge will not flow ink. And you know how you get rid of that block? By blowing into it. You'll have beautiful Technicolor lips by the time you get done solving some of these ink locks. So we want to avoid that. So let's go ahead and try to do this on this particular cartridge here. Now this is one of many that I have, and yeah, I get a lot of cartridges sent to me. People don't want them. I say, of course, send them to me. This has not been flushed. Of course, you cannot really flush these conveniently unless our friend comes up with a clip that allows us to flush them, and we'll see what that may be in the future, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the clip. This is a third-party clip. You can get this from Rick Johnson and Precisioncolors as well. Now this sponge has not been protected. It has sat around without a clip, so it is probably bone dry internally. I'm going to add like a couple of drops of ink right on it. We'll let that sit, let that saturate into that sponge. That will give me a wet starting point. This is not part of the instructions, but I decided to do that. And I do that often also with cartridges that I receive from people, even after I modify them. Let's go ahead and install the clip designed and 3D printed by RUDY, and it is a very tight fit, so you have to squeeze and get that little clip attached. There you go. So now we are secure. We have now sealed that exit port perfectly well. Let's bring the camera closer and let's begin the process. Wish us luck, folks. All right, stop the presses. We are going to stop right now because RUDY just contacted me and told me that I may have overfilled the cartridge. I pumped it too many times. Now, those of you who saw the preliminary results began to give their opinion and their complaints and everything. And you got to realize that for years, we were looking for methods to refill these cartridges. And we had many failures. We had many ink accidents everywhere, many messes, even with the so-called easy squeezy bottle and needle system. Yeah, you got to be careful regardless of how you do this. So the comment about this being a messy process, well, yeah, it can be if you're a messy person. I got a little bit of ink on my finger because I forgot to put a protective cap on the cartridge. You're supposed to do that regardless. Now, with the refill method that we have been using, the cap is always on the cartridge, so you're not going to experience any kind of messes. But, you know, you got to realize this is still a experimental process, and we will learn as we go. And this is not for everyone. Those of you who are married to the current version of refilling, stick to that. That works for you, fine. It works for me as well. And I'm going to continue to use it, but this is simply another option. There are folks out there who will not want to do drilling on their cartridges, and maybe they don't even want to purchase them pre-modified, although I do recommend you do that if you want to go down that road. Now, there is another gadget available, and I believe this comes from the UK. I will check again and post a link on my description. Basically, it's just a clamp. So you have a clip such as this that has had a needle attached to it. I have one of those as well. In fact, there it is. I should have looked a little closer. You attach this to the cartridge and then you get a clamp that basically seals the vent, and then you insert a syringe and you pump your ink in. Is this orientation the proper way? Or should you orient it in this direction so that the cartridge is basically upright? Or should you just do it in this direction? Okay, RUDY has played around with this for a while, and he has determined this is the best way to go. So I'm just going to stick with that. What we're going to do is I uploaded 13 ml of ink, and I am not going to continue pumping until I fill up the chamber. I'm going to pump until I get a little bit of air left in it. And that's going to make it look like this. He sent me this, and it basically shows right here a little bit of air in that chamber. Now, can we get the sponge to still react the way the OEM cartridges do? Probably not. Probably not, but neither does the regular refilling method that we have been using for years now. So let's go ahead and bring the camera up close. We're going to proceed with the method. I'm going to go ahead and aim the camera at this window, which apparently has been designed for you to visualize what the ink levels are on the liquid chamber. And I think that's what we're going to go for. Let's just see what happens when I begin to do this. So let's do that now. All right, let's go ahead and begin. Now, What I recommend you do is to put a long needle on your bottle. Otherwise, you may have a problem with the needle being almost the same diameter as the hole on your syringe, and you may get some ink all over yourself. So let's go ahead and insert the needle into that hole, tilt it, fill the syringe to the designated mark, like so. Extract some of the air out of the bottle. Here we go. See what I mean? You may end up getting some bubbles. So we'll just stop there. I think that's plenty of ink, and we'll aspirate that air out very, very carefully until it's almost to the top. I would recommend you hold a paper towel over the syringe, put that aside. It'll be ready for us when we need it. Now, let's go take a look at this cartridge. This was basically allowed to go bone dry. I got these sent to me by a user who obviously is not going to refill. So normally what I would do in this situation is modify the cartridge and flush it and then rejuvenate it with my rejuvenation fluid. There's videos that show you how to mix that fluid up with very readily available components, and then you allow it to dry after you reflush it again, and then it's able to be refilled. And what it's doing is actually allowing those fibers to absorb ink. At this point, there's a lot of air trapped in there, and who knows, that ink may be dried internally. So this is basically the worst possible situation you could be in. If we can succeed to fill this using that method, then, you know, that says it all. Let's go ahead and help this situation out a little bit, because the port is very dry. You can see that it's very light in color. That's because it's probably full of air. Let's go ahead and dribble some ink in it. We want to set up a situation where that port is already well saturated with liquid. Again, those of you who use the other method, you guys are laughing at me. But again, I am an explorer. I like to check other possibilities. And the idea, if you believe the theory that by not modifying the cartridge and then affecting the hydraulics, you will get better ink flow, then maybe this will not seem so funny to you. Now notice the upper portion of the sponge is still white. That's the OEM condition, but notice I got some ink already flowing inside. So basically that bottom portion of the sponge is becoming more friendly toward liquid, and it will probably accept it a lot easier. Okay, I zoomed the camera in a little bit more. We're going to go ahead and install the clip. Remember to make sure that it is tight and that it physically clicks on this point right here. So this is ready to be installed. The port has to be upright in this orientation like so. So we'll insert it in and tighten the clamp for the vent. And again, this is going to be finger tight. Right about that point right here. We want to be able to create a vacuum as well as enable us to apply positive pressure. Let's go ahead and install the syringe. Like so. And I'm going to orient it in this orientation so that it matches the diagram that Rudy sent me. And if you guys take a close look right here, you see there's an air gap on that liquid chamber. That's as high as we want to go. Okay? No higher than that. And at this point, remember that the sponge is dried except for that frontal little region that we added some ink to. Let me adjust the angle here so we can see what we're doing. Now, one modification that I would love to see is some sort of window that would allow us to see the progress of the sponge saturation, because that's important. And if we can manage to saturate that sponge so that it kind of looks similar to this, that would really make my day. So let's begin. Ink is flowing into the liquid chamber. I am reaching a point where it's very difficult to push the plunger. I'll relax, pull back, apply some more positive pressure. You see the liquid chamber filling up. Apparently, from what Rudy told me, it should only take about 2 pushes. And then when you refill your own cartridge, remember that this sponge, even when declared empty, will have about 3 to 4 ml of ink in it. And this holds only a total factory fill. It's about 14.5, 15 ml. Supposedly, we really do not know exactly how much ink goes into these cartridges. The idea is to fill them until it looks correct. And that kind of matches what my diagram over there indicated to me. Maybe we will add a little bit more ink and pull back. Okay, so at this point, let me see, one more little, there you go. One more little push. Okay, so we'll bring the plunger back to neutralize the pressure. Basically right there is sucking it back in. You see that? That's the neutral position. So let's go ahead and unscrew the syringe carefully. So yeah, this is a lot more tedious. Is it more accurate? We don't know. We'll have to see how these cartridges behave in the printer as we proceed to print with them. Let's go ahead and loosen the vent, and we'll take a look and see what we have. We have a level about this high. It's hard to see, but it's about right there, which is what I would recommend normally anyway. The upper portion of the sponge seems a little bit light. This area here doesn't look like it was fully saturated yet, of course. So what I am going to do is I'm going to put a clip on these, let them sit for a week, and then check them again before I go ahead and install them on the printer. Because at this point, I'm not sure how well these cartridges would be flowing ink, in other words. It's not like we can run a drip test like we can on our modified cartridges. Yes, we can do that with those, but not with these. I don't see any ink dripping. So again, that kind of tells me something. So I'm going to go ahead and undo the clip. I'm going to hold it this way. I'm going to hold and squeeze the sides, and I do see saturation of ink beginning to form. So I think after a period of time, these cartridges basically sitting upright and resting, that will bring them up to a more optimal condition. But remember, you're not going to do what I just did. You're going to refill your empty immediately. Okay, you're going to reset it and fill it. And you may ask, well, what about the others? All this time we have been refilling all the cartridges at once. We're going to talk about that next. All right, remember how we are going to rely on that window showing us what the liquid chamber looks like. If the cartridge was partially filled, you should be able to see how much ink was already in that chamber. And all you got to do is continue adding ink until you reach that magical point, the one that I stopped at, or the one indicated here. So we were very concerned about how to, refill partially used cartridges. Well, the same way. You reset them, you pop them in, you load the ink, enough ink, to have you some spare ink left. Okay, you will have some spare ink left. And then proceed with the refilling until you visually see that the chamber is up at that particular level shown on the illustration. This is a PDF form that will be made available for those of you who want to go this route. Again, I am not pushing this, forcing you guys to use this process. I'm just giving you another option. If you do not want to mess with your original cartridges in any way, shape, or form, then you can choose this route. It's been around for decades, I tell you, but people just didn't have the nerve to really explore how to proceed with this. Now, I may have mentioned earlier, maybe I did, that there is a clamp that you can buy that basically uses something similar to this. This is a modified clip. I added a syringe needle to it. This clamps onto your cartridge, and then you need to clamp the vent shut, and then you basically use a syringe from underneath. What is the magical angle? What is the proper angle to allow that chamber to fill and the sponge to not oversaturate? I think that's what Rudy was messing around with for so long until he got it to this point, and this is what he arrived at. So again, the proof will be how well do the printers perform with these cartridges filled in this manner. That's the next test that I am going to be performing, and so I suspect it'll be fine. I remember filling empty cartridges that had more air than that in the sponge doing the traditional method, and they still seem to work. After about one run, it would basically balance itself out. So remember, you're going to do this with your freshly empty cart, reset it, fill it. The sponge should be in perfect condition at that point. And if you keep your eye on that liquid chamber, don't let it go all the way to the top, then you will not have any kind of clogging of your air vents, and that can cause trouble down the road. All right, thank you so much. I hope you guys enjoy this. Again, remember, this is just another option, so stop yelling at me. Okay, please stop yelling at me. I did not come up with this. I'm just helping out a friend who did a heck of a lot of work to arrive at the point where we are now. So thank you so much. Don't forget to subscribe, please, and like. And until the next time, happy printing, happy refilling. Bye-bye, everyone.